What happens when in the middle of Formula One season, one of the most emblematic teams of the paddock radically changes the technical structure of its star pilot? What if that pilot is nothing less than Lewis Hamilton? The trigger occurred at the Belgian Grand Prix, played at Spa-Francorchamps on July 27th. A technical circuit, medium-high aerodynamic load, where the sensitivity of the car to dynamic behavior is maximized. That weekend, despite the improvements introduced in the rear suspension of SF25, Hamilton failed to find a stable balance. Its feedback indicated a lack of consistency in high-speed curves and excessive sensitivity to height changes, key elements that hindered its fluid conduction style. The team detected that much of these difficulties were not solved alone with adjustments in the car. The problem also was to how their comments were interpreted and translated from cockpit. Ferrari's technical direction, aware that the championship was slowly escaping in front of the solid McLaren of Norris and the technical resurrection of Mercedes and Red Bull, made a drastic but necessary decision. Replace Ricardo Cut as Hamilton's performance engineer. Cut, although experienced, was not managing to synchronize its analysis with Hamilton's intuitive reading about the behavior of the SF25. Instead, he opted for Johannes Hatz, a young engineer but tanned in pressure contexts, with a technical trajectory that made him an ideal profile to face the second section of the championship. These types of decisions rarely occur in full season without consequences. Changing performance engineer not only implies modifying the technical interpretation of the car data, but also reconfiguring the emotional and psychological communication channel between pilot and engineer. In a sport where a tenth of a second can be the difference between pole and the second row, that relationship of confidence and mutual understanding is fundamental. In the middle of the year, with 13 races still to be played, Ferrari opted to redefine that link in record time. The situation became even more symbolic if Hamilton's recent history is considered in Mercedes. There, his relationship with Peter Bonington, Bonus, had become one of the most legendary of modern F1, based on years of work, mutual understanding and tactical complicity. Replicating that synergy in Ferrari would be a titanic task, but also a need if you want to aspire to the title. And with Johannes Hatz, Ferrari opened a new era in his technical management approach, one in which adapting to the pilot was no longer only a luxury, but an obligation. Johannes Hatz is not the typical Formula engineer one molded exclusively within the walls of a great team. His profile is the result of a technical trajectory forged through various disciplines of motorsport, marked by a progressive evolution that took him from the paddocks of resistance championships to the technological epicenter of Formula One. Son of Wolfgang Hatz, who was a member of the Porsche Administration Board of Directors for Research and Development, Johannes grew in an environment where automotive engineering was part of the daily language. That paternal influence not only granted him a privileged perspective of motor racing, but instilled a work philosophy based on precision, innovation, and adaptability. The ascent to working directly with Hamilton was not a spontaneous promotion, but a natural consequence of its technical performance and strategic vision. When it became evident that the connection between Hamilton and his previous engineer Ricardo Corte was not generating the expected results, Hatz was proposed as an alternative by a group of high-level engineers within the equipment. His choice was backed by Frédéric Vasseur himself, who valued his transversal experience, his modern technical profile, and his ability to quickly adapt to the pilot's psychology. However, his arrival at that role was also accompanied by some confusion. After the Belgian GP, Hamilton publicly declared that he knew his new engineer for years, and that they had worked together in their former team. These words, although well-intentioned, generated a media stir. Many assumed that Hatz came from Mercedes when they never really shared structure. This wrong perception was clarified later, but suggests a key aspect. Hatz has been so competent in its integration to Ferrari, which it managed to generate in a short time a feeling of familiarity with one of the most demanding pilots of paddock. In the background, Johannes Hatz represents a new generation of Formula engineers, one that combines a solid technical basis with an emotional and communicational sensitivity capable of understanding that the relationship with the pilot is not only a data transaction, but a high-pressure real-time collaboration in real time. With his history, his open mentality, and his ability to adapt, Hatz not only arrives in Ferrari as a problem-solving. It comes as a fundamental piece to transform Hamilton's potential into tangible results. The advantages of having Hatz in this role are multiple and forceful. Its deep knowledge of dynamics of suspension and optimization of car behavior in different aerodynamic and thermal windows will be particularly useful for Ferrari. The SF25 has proven to be a car very sensitive to the height and progressive wear of the compounds. This became evident after the modifications introduced in the Belgian GP, where the rear suspension system was updated to reduce the rake dependence and minimize the braking instability. Hatz, with his experience in racing bulls and his non-orthodox approach, can provide new paths of interpretation of that data, unlocking hidden potential in a car that has not yet reached its performance roof. However, not everything is strengths. The risk of making this change in full season is capital. The relationship between pilot and engineer is not built in simulators or post-carrier analysis. It is built in the heat of the competition, in moments of maximum pressure, in the ability to anticipate what the other needs even before he says. And in that sense, time is the most scarce resource of the calendar. Every weekend has a single free session to experiment before entering the classification and race dynamics, especially in sprint format events. This means that Hamilton and Hatz must forge their understanding with an unusual speed even in the elite standards of motoring. In addition, this change comes at a time when Hamilton is already handling multiple adaptation factors. A new car with a completely different aerodynamic philosophy, a new cultural environment after years of stability in Mercedes, a different career engineer, Riccardo Adami, and a media pressure that places him as El Salvador de Ferrari. Add a new technical element to that equation can paradoxically increase confusion. The lack of continuity could lead to erratic setup decisions, difficulty finding the ideal performance window, and consequently, inconsistent results that affect both the morals of the team and the options in the championship. Looking ahead, Hatz's presence could also redefine Ferrari's technical approach beyond 2025. With the 2026 technical regulations on the horizon, the Scuderia needs voices that think beyond the immediate. Hatz represents a new school of engineering, more holistic, more open to the integration of tools such as machine learning, predictive simulation, and biomechanics applied to piloting. His role with Hamilton could be the perfect laboratory to experience solutions that then climb to the conceptual development of SF26, the car that must fight for the championship in a new era of F1. In short, Johannes Hatz's appointment as a performance engineer is a decision that has the ability to change the course of a season and reconfigure Ferrari's technical architecture. If the connection with Hamilton works, if they manage to read the car from the same perspective and turn their differences into strengths, the Scuderia will have taken a bold step towards the future. If they do not get it, the change will not only be ineffective, but could consolidate 2025 as another year of failed transition. And in Ferrari, that margin of error no longer exists. What is happening in Ferrari with Lewis Hamilton and Johannes Hatz is much more than a simple technical restructuring. It is a silent but forceful message to the rest of the paddock. Ferrari will not settle for a 2025 passive adaptation. He is willing to alter its operational foundations to build a platform that can sustain the weight of a pilot who has been 7 times world champion and who, despite the passage of time, still is hungry for glory. Changing a performance engineer is not only to replace a functional piece, it is to rewrite the human interface between the pilot and the car. It is to alter the frequency with which the interpretation of the car is communicated. And that, in a sport as obsessed with precision as Formula One, can have huge implications. For Lewis Hamilton, this decision represents a rare and valuable opportunity. In his passage through Mercedes, he witnessed how a perfect alignment between pilot, engineer, and technical structure could generate hegemony. But he was also a victim, in his last years there, of a descending curve caused by disconnection with the development of the car. In Ferrari, he had the option to start a new stage as a marketing and prestige figure, or as a technical leader. With Hatz by his side, the second option begins to take shape. It is no longer just to extract tenths from the SF25, but to lay the foundations of a symbiosis that can mark an era in Maranello. History has shown it before. When a pilot manages to mold his technical environment, championships do not take long to arrive. For Ferrari, this movement has the potential to become the turning point that has sought so much since the departure of Sebastian Vettel and the restructuring of its directive dome. Frédéric Vasseur is making it clear that his management will not be conservative, that you are willing to dynamite internal structures if that means finding the right alchemy between car, pilot, and engineer, and that Hamilton's arrival is not a symbolic action, but a declaration of ambition. Hatz is not a random choice or a minor file. It is a gear that, well calibrated, can turn an unstable machine into a competitive beast. And even more important, this movement projects a changed narrative. Ferrari is not simply reacting to the results of the first races. He is anticipating the future. The change in the performance engineer is a surgical intervention designed not only to save this season, but to accelerate the cultural transformation of a team that has been raising a title for more than a decade. If Hamilton and Hatz manage to build that technical emotional bridge successfully, they will not only gain races, they could return to Ferrari the winning identity they have sought desperately for years. Leave me in the duties that you thought about this video, and do you think that Ferrari will do better in the next races?